Hello, my name is Laura Frye, and I played Hamlet for Titan Theater Company in New York City.
Hi, I'm Shannon Hill, and I played Hamlet for Houston Shakespeare Festival in 2018.
Now, the Queen's Theater is located in Flushing Meadows Park.
Miller Outdoor Theater is huge.
The reason that is so significant in New York City is because it is the site of the 1964 World's Fair, and the Queen's Theater is actually the original structure that was connected to the GM Pavilion at the 1964 World's Fair. So it's a really historical place. It's a really cool venue to play in.
It's very wide and very deep, and it's an outdoor theater.
You can move the audience around in any configuration you want, whether that's proscenium, whether that's thrust, whether that's in the round. You have that flexibility as a director to change it.
Luckily, there's air conditioning on the stage and backstage, which is great.
For our production of Hamlet, we actually set within much like a baseball diamond. So you had one side of the audience was located in between first and second base. The other was located second and third.
I think there are about 1,000 seats, and then there's a giant hill behind that people sit on and bring picnics and all that kind of fun stuff. So it's a great outdoor family event.
It was an extremely intimate space. There was no more than 85 when we added seats, but no more than 85 patrons at any one show. So I myself was never any more than 5 feet away from someone at all times, which made for a really interesting evening of theater, especially with Hamlet and the journey that Hamlet goes on, not only with himself, but with the audience there in tow.
The average audience size is on a Friday or Saturday night can be between 6,000 to 10,000 people. So it is huge.
I could hear them, I could see them, I could smell them, I could hear every little bit of sound that was coming from them, which right before To Be or Not to Be, that very quiet moment before, is a little bone chilling whenever you start to hear wrappers being unwrapped.
So I'm in a 1-bedroom apartment in Philadelphia. So imagine when I take a few steps this way, I'm actually walking 20 feet or more. Our production was loosely based in the 1960s. It was very dramatic, very action-packed.
So we were using at the time one of the most advanced technical projection software that was on the market. And the way we used that projection software was to take flat screen TVs. In fact, we had 9 flat screen TVs that were placed upstage.
By dramatic, I mean lots of transitional music and some underscoring and things like that. And it was very dark and sleek.
And if you can imagine behind me now, if this whole wall was all flat screen TVs, so no matter what setting we were in at any given time within the show, that would be projected up on these screens.
The stage was pretty simple. There were 2 giant staircases leading up to a second platform, and there were entrances underneath those staircases.
For instance, in the praying scene, we would have a cathedral-like backdrop. Outdoor scenes would have that snow falling down. We would use it to manipulate also different things going on in Hamlet's head.
Part of the floor opened up for the grave. And then there was a spot in front of the stage. It was a lower part of the apron.
This was how I talked to the ghost, to Hamlet's father. So Jonathan Smootz, who played Hamlet's father, he recorded all of his pieces in Milwaukee and then sent those to New York City. They were then taken up by our technical staff, who put them into the system and projected him on these flat screen TVs, the entire body of Jonathan Smootz on those flat screen TV. And so then I would speak to my father facing up towards those screens, and he would come in and out throughout the show and be a part of it.
There were lots of levels, lots of height differences, and lots of simple yet powerful large set statements, and very little furniture on stage.
And it was really interesting because normally the stage manager would have control over when the ghost was speaking, because we had that ability to be able to do that. However, to make it more seamless, we timed it out. So every night that I spoke to my father on stage, it was timed. So I had to physically feel that. I had to be aware of it, almost like muscle memory, when to stop, when to speak, get myself through it so that the ghost of Hamlet's father didn't overstep my lines and jump in before I was finished.
This set also had to convert to comedy of errors every other night. So it was something that the set design had to work for both shows throughout the run of the festival.
So that was really interesting to play with that. It felt like I was in a musical a little bit. Okay, so the first aria, this is the big one. This is the first one right out of the gate.
The moment that launches this monologue for me was actually, we had these cloaks that were part of cloaks that we would wear for Claudius's coronation ceremony.
So there is that level of dislike and disgust over his uncle stepping in and marrying, because his uncle is not the level of man that his father was.
And when I first came on stage, I was wearing it like this, because I was like, no way am I going to support his coronation. But throughout the scene, he ends up putting it on me.
The entire cast was on stage, and right before the moment happens and Hamlet starts speaking with tutu solid flesh, there is a build up in tone and then a freeze frame. The lights shift and the focus goes straight to Hamlet.
And there is a cannon sound, and when that cannon sound happened and trumpets happened, everyone else on stage froze. And this was kind of a look into my inner thoughts.
What I found so aha moment, if you will, was how much animosity and anger and hurt and betrayal that Hamlet feels towards his mother, and how this whole aria really speaks to the disgust, the distrust that he now has kind of eating away at him and living inside of him towards his mother.
And for me, this cloak felt like my skin was burning from the inside out, and I could not believe I had let myself go through this, through his coronation, without saying anything, without standing up for my father. And so this cloak felt like a giant betrayal for my dad, and I was burning through my skin.
There's so much to play with in that moment of just holding on and not releasing that kind of disgust towards this one particular person. So when I felt that, I knew that was going to be such a jumping off point for me for the entire rest of the play.
Where does this monologue lead me throughout the rest of the show?
I started to map out where in this play are there going to be moments where this disgust and this anger and this betrayal and this distrust, where does it keep rearing its ugly head?
This monologue helped propel the bedroom scene.
This little gem that I found in the first discovery, in the first aria, I started to notice, what does that do every time that she's in the room with him? What does that do with every person that is friends with her? What does that do with his relationship with Ophelia? What does that do with his whole relationship with women in general, and what he thinks of them?
All of this hatred I keep bottled up until it's revealed that Claudius did kill my father, and I knew that I was right, and then it explodes.
And it was interesting to play with that idea, because he does everything right with his promise to his father, except for one thing. He is unable to let it go when it comes to his mother.
If you're familiar with Hamlet, when Hamlet bursts in on his mom in her bedroom and ends up stabbing Polonius.
And his father asked him specifically, to leave her out of this. And he is unable to do that all the way to the very end of this play, when he curses her and asks her to follow his uncle to hell. He just was never able to let that seed of hate and anger go.
And I take out all that rage that I have been building up and all of that fear and anxiety.
We are set up to watch this young man go on this journey of his inability to release his grief or give, enough time to release his grief. There is no time limit in how long we grieve for someone, and his mother pushes that upon him again and again and again,
and just let it rip at her, so much so that I end up killing an innocent man during that scene.
I just thought it was, wow, what an amazing and terrifying journey it must be to harbor that much hate towards one person that at one time you loved very, very much.
Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew! Or that the everlasting had not fixed his can and get self-slaughter! Oh God. God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world! Fie on it! Oh, fie! 'Tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. That it should come to this. But 2 months dead. Nay, not so much, not 2. So excellent a king as was to this, Hyperion to a satyr, so loving to my mother that he might not beteem the winds of heaven visit her face too roughly. Heaven and earth must I remember, why she would hang on him as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on, and yet within a month, let me not think on it, frailty, thy name is woman. A little month, ere yet those shoes were old with which she followed my poor father's body, like Niobe, all tears was she. Even she, oh God, a beast that wants discourse of reason would have mourned longer, married with my uncle, my father's brother, but no more like my father than I to Hercules. Within a month, ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing in her galled eyes, she married. Oh, most wicked speed, to post with such dexterity to ancestral sheets. It is not, nor it cannot come to good, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue.
Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw and resolve itself into a dew, or that the everlasting had not fixed his ken against self-slaughter. Oh, God! How weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Fiant! Tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely, that it should come to this. But 2 months dead, nay, not so much, not 2. So excellent a king that was to this Hyperion, to a satyr, so loving to my mother that he might not beteem the winds of heaven visit her face too roughly. Heaven and earth must I remember. Why, she would hang on him as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on, and yet within a month, let me not think on't. Frailty, thy name is woman. A little month, or ere those shoes were old with which he followed my poor father's body like Niobe, all tears. Why, she, even she, oh God, a beast that once discoursed for reason would have mourned longer, married with my uncle, my father's brother, but no more like my father than I to Hercules. Within a month, ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing in her galled eyes, she married. O most wicked speed to post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets. It is not, nor it cannot come to good, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. When we were approached to play the role of Hamlet, we had researched and watched archival footage of others that came before us playing the role, and the majority of that footage is men playing the role of Hamlet. So it was always a real treat whenever I would, pass through and find a woman, and there's been many famous women that have taken on the role of Hamlet, but it was always a treat to see other women bring that role to life, and it was no different watching your performance.
So there were a couple of things that I really enjoyed about Laura's interpretation.
The first being at the very top of the piece, the urgency to strip yourself of the formality of the moment. I thought that was such a bold and strong choice. And it was a choice that I, as the audience, didn't even have to think and ponder on, like, why would they do that? I knew immediately what you were conveying to us. And it was apparent in the white coat that you wore, which I think is a really great costume choice, but also that need to be disgusted by the situation that you find yourself in and needing to somewhat like wash away the effects of that day.
The first thing being, I loved, because of the difference in our theaters and the spaces that we were working in, I loved how intimate hers was and how it really felt like like someone who was maybe just like whispering to a friend about how they were feeling and what was going on.
The other choices that I felt drawn in and compelled to was the argument with God. And I think that sometimes gets overlooked, that it's one of the initial moments for us as an audience to realize the world in which we live in is one that heavily believes in the spiritual and in God and follows the rules of the Bible as far as things like suicide and apparitions and all of that is concerned.
When Hamlet says, "Frailty, thy name is woman," it was a realization for Laura's Hamlet that all women are terrible, which really informs the rest of the play and Hamlet's treatment of Ophelia and of Gertrude.
I did feel, and I feel strongly about this particular choice myself when playing the role, is that disgust towards your mother and who she is and the character of her person. And that came across very clear in your piece.
But that's something that I really enjoyed about that. And one of the last things that I loved about it was Laura's use of the alliteration with to post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets.
That moment at the end where it comes all the way around, we see Hamlet having to go back into the formality of the moment. I loved your choice there. Completely myself would have never thought to take it there. So I'm so glad that you offered that as a choice when playing the role of Hamlet. And I have to say, there are many things in your performance, with your permission, that if I ever get the chance to play it again, I will probably take a little bit of this, take a little bit of that, because it was so compelling and strong.
I thought it was just like icing on a cake. It was just icing on a cake of what Hamlet is thinking and that coming out through speech.
So thank you, Shannon, for sharing this with us. And thank you to everyone for allowing us to share our work with you. And I look forward to hopefully seeing everybody on that stage again soon. So thank you so much.
Next!